A strangled cry echoed through first class. A black man in a tailored suit was pulled to his feet under the cold stare of a flight attendant and the malicious whispers of fellow passengers. Andre Coleman felt his whole body tremble, not from fear, but from a fury compressed so tightly it was about to explode. He did not shout. He did not fight back. He simply opened his phone, hit record, and let the world bear witness. Just hours later, the video had surpassed 60 million views. An entire nation woke up in shock, seeing a man who had paid full price for a first-class seat forced out as if he were an intruder. Those who had treated him with disdain suddenly staggered as if stripped of their masks before the crowd. And in that moment, Andre knew. This time, he would not remain silent. Andre Coleman, 39 years old, was no stranger to suspicion. He grew up in a rough corner of Baltimore, where police sirens and flashing lights were the backdrop of childhood. His mother, Denise, worked 2 jobs, by day a nurse, by night an office cleaner, just to keep the family from sliding deeper into the abyss. His father, a factory worker, often came home long after sunset, the calloused hands he laid on the dinner table still carrying the heavy scent of machine oil. "Education is the only ticket out," his father would say, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but voice firm. Those words rooted themselves inside Andre, like a sacred commandment. At 14, while his peers wrestled with homework, Andre stood behind a supermarket counter, stacking shelves until midnight. He worked while studying, refusing to let his grades slip. The dim neon lights often burned his eyes, but he never allowed himself to rest for more than a blink. His 4 years at university were grueling. He majored in computer engineering while juggling 3 part-time jobs: line cook, computer lab assistant, and math tutor. Each time he felt crushed enough to quit, he remembered his father's words. He remembered his mother's bent back, worn down day after day. And so he stood back up and kept going. He graduated with a perfect GPA, a brilliant achievement that should have flung open the doors of opportunity. But when he pitched to investors, Andre was met only with skeptical glances. "Great idea," they said, "but maybe you should partner with someone, more reassuring to investors." Their words sounded like advice, but the weight of prejudice was all too clear. One potential partner leaned back in his chair, scanning Andre from head to toe before smirking. "A black guy from Baltimore leading the future of cybersecurity. You think Wall Street will buy that?" Andre simply smiled, packed up his files, and walked out. That night, in his tiny apartment with its rickety wooden desk, he rewrote code until dawn. 15 years later, from doodles scribbled on napkins, Andre had built DataForge, now valued at over $2 billion. His systems protected data for dozens of global corporations. Just days earlier, he had closed a $400 million deal with international investors to expand into 27 countries, a milestone even he struggled to believe he had reached. "You deserve a break," said his close aide, Elena Brooks, a sharp and thoughtful woman in her early 30s. "Fly first class, just this once." Andre had lived simply for years, driving an old sedan, booking economy tickets, staying in modest hotels. But this time he nodded. A victory deserved to be marked. He booked a first-class ticket on the Atlanta-San Francisco route, seat 2A. For once in his life, he would step on a plane without shrinking his dreams of comfort. That morning, Atlanta's airport pulsed with chaotic energy. Andre arrived in a charcoal Armani suit, polished Oxford shoes, and a sleek leather briefcase. His mother's voice seemed to echo beside him. "If they're going to judge you before you speak, then make sure they see you prepared." At check-in, the receptionist greeted him warmly. "Welcome, Mr. Coleman. Thank you for choosing first class." A flicker of pride rose in him, but the feeling dissolved at the security checkpoint. "Random screening," the TSA officer said flatly. Andre looked around. 2 white businessmen before and after him were waved through without pause. He swallowed his irritation, handed over his bag and laptop, and stood still while the scanner swept over him. In the first-class lounge, he spotted a familiar face, Thomas Whitfield, an aging janitor with a bent back. "Mr. Coleman, my God, I saw your picture in Black Enterprise last month. My grandson admires you. He's studying IT at Georgia Tech." Andre smiled and shook his hand firmly. "Give me his email. I'll help connect him with an internship at Data Forge." The old man's eyes lit up, his back seeming a little straighter. Andre watched him go, his own heart filled with a mix of joy and sorrow. How many young talents had been buried forever, just because of where they came from? The loudspeaker crackled. "Aero Coast Flight 1382 to San Francisco is now boarding first-class passengers at Gate A7. Andre drew a deep breath. This was the reward for years of sacrifice. He walked forward with the composure of a man who belonged. But at the aircraft door, the smile of flight attendant Brooke Sanders froze the moment she saw him. She checked his ticket twice, her eyes narrowing with suspicion, as if silently asking, "Are you sure this is your seat?" Andre held his smile, but inside, a chill of foreboding stirred. This flight would be far from ordinary. Seat 2A glimmered under the soft cabin lights of first class. Andre Coleman placed his leather briefcase neatly in the overhead bin and arranged his tablet on the small table. Everything was precise, calm, but calm was often only the surface before the storm. A young flight attendant hung his suit jacket in the closet. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Coleman. Wine or champagne?" This time her tone was not as cold as it had been at the aircraft door. Andre gave a slight nod, choosing a glass of sparkling water. He wanted his mind sharp. A disturbance rippled from the front. A heavy-set man with a flushed face and labored breath pushed through the aisle. Richard Langford, 50-5, a businessman in an expensive but wrinkled suit, entered as though the entire cabin had been waiting for him. "Sorry, the call ran long. Appreciate your patience." He laughed loudly, overflowing with confidence. His eyes landed on the front row. The moment he saw Andre settled in seat 2A, his smile vanished. "I think you're in the wrong seat." His voice carried like an order. Andre looked up, pointing to the ticket resting on his table. 2A. "My seat." Richard frowned and flashed his own ticket. "Impossible. I fly this route every month. It's always 2A. Tension spread through the cabin like electricity. Some passengers looked up, anticipating the familiar scene. A passenger who didn't fit the mold, about to be moved aside. Chief Flight Attendant Karen McAllister, her blonde hair neatly tied back, a golden badge gleaming on her chest, appeared. Her expression immediately leaned toward Richard. "Apologies for the inconvenience, Mr. Langford. Let me check." Andre kept his voice steady. "I booked this seat 3 weeks ago. I have the confirmation email." He held up his phone, proof displayed clearly. Karen barely glanced at it before turning back to Richard with a reassuring nod. It's probably a system error. Andre's eyes grew colder. He knew very well this was no error. What about another seat in first class? He asked evenly. All full, Karen replied, her reluctance barely hidden. Richard crossed his arms, his voice booming. I've got back problems. I need this exact seat. He can move elsewhere. From further back, a female voice spoke up. Priya Shah, an Asian businesswoman, leaned forward. Excuse me, but he has a ticket and a confirmation email. You can't just dismiss that. Karen turned back, face tightening. Ma'am, we'll handle this. Please do not interfere. A deep male voice followed. David Ortiz, a black attorney in a navy suit, braced his hand on the seat in front. I've watched from the start. It's clear he has the legal right to sit here. The way this is being handled isn't right. The air thickened. Eyes flicked toward Andre, some sympathetic, others filled with doubt. Karen clutched her iPad tighter, whispering to Brooke, the boarding attendant. Both cast furtive glances at Andre, as if he were a threat. Richard folded his arms, smirking. Can we get this plane moving? Some people don't seem to know their place. Every word, some people, fell like a blade. Andre had heard it too many times before. In the warm glow of first class, the phrase sounded heavier than any insult. He drew a deep breath, containing the storm boiling in his chest. Every move was being scrutinized, every glance ready to brand him difficult. The cockpit door swung open. Captain Daniel O'Neill, 4 gold stripes on his shoulders, stepped out. His voice struck like a gavel. What's holding up this flight? Richard jumped in, pointing at Andre. He's in my seat, Captain. I've flown this route for years, always in two-way. Now we're all waiting because of him. Daniel cast Andre a glance, his expression already decided. We need to resolve this. Show me your documents. Andre handed over his ticket and email. Daniel glanced briefly before turning to Karen. What does the system say? It shows a duplicate seat, Captain. But Mr. Langford is a diamond, tier passenger. Daniel gave a slight nod, as if the conclusion was self-evident. Mr. Coleman, I'm going to ask you to move to premium economy. Andre sat taller, his voice slow and firm. I've done nothing wrong. I paid for this seat. I have valid confirmation. This is my seat. Silence swept the cabin. Passengers held their breath. Priya leaned forward again. Captain, this isn't Mr. Coleman's fault. He has the ticket. Do the rules only apply to some people? David added, voice unwavering. If he leaves his seat, this is no longer about resolving an error. It's discrimination. Daniel's brow furrowed. Everyone, please remain seated. Do not escalate this further. Andre understood. This was no longer about seat 2A. This was a test, a message. They wanted him to know that no matter how successful he was, he could still be pushed aside because of how he looked. He opened his phone, discreetly starting the camera. If the truth was going to be twisted, he would have proof. Richard leaned closer, muttering loudly enough for others to hear. People like you, always causing trouble, never knowing your place. Andre kept his gaze steady. He did not react. But in his heart, a decision crystallized. This time, he would not stay silent. Karen stepped forward, her voice tight. "Mr. Coleman, if you do not comply, we'll be forced to call security." Whispers rippled across the cabin. Some shook their heads, irritated, believing he was the problem. But others looked at him differently, with empathy, even respect. Andre drew a long breath, the air feeling thin in the cabin. His father's voice echoed in his mind. "Stand tall, son, not with anger, but with the certainty that you belong." Beyond the cabin door, the shadows of security personnel were approaching, and Andre knew this was only the beginning of a battle that would shake an entire industry. The small chime from the cockpit echoed through the cabin, but everyone in first class heard it clearly. "Security, please come to the main door." Those few words landed like a cold verdict, stamped on Andre Coleman's fate. He sat still. His body was taut like a drawn string, yet his face remained calm. His hand rested on his phone, its camera silently recording every glance, every word. This was no longer just about him. This was about everyone who had ever been forced into silence. The cabin door opened. 3 security officers entered, black shoes gleaming, broad shoulders, faces expressionless. They walked with certainty, as though they already knew exactly where the disruptive passenger was seated. Karen McAllister pointed straight at Andre, her voice firm. "That's the passenger. He refused to follow instructions." Every eye turned to him. Some whispered, "What's he doing? And why doesn't he just cooperate?" Andre drew a deep breath, then spoke with clarity, his voice steady, unhurried. "I have a valid ticket for this seat. I have not raised my voice, nor caused any disturbance. I am simply sitting in the seat I paid for." The security chief, a short man with a buzz cut, glanced at the ticket and then looked at Captain Daniel O'Neill. Daniel shook his head slightly, his eyes saying it all. "Take him away." Andre understood. The decision had been made before they even entered. Richard Langford leaned back in his seat, lips curling into a smirk. He savored the moment like a spectator watching a play of his own design. "Finally. Taken care of," he murmured, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Priya Shah sat upright, raising her phone. "I'm recording too," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the air. Karen snapped her head around, eyes flashing. "Recording is not allowed on this flight." David Ortiz let out a dry laugh. "Interesting. Dozens of people have been taking selfies this whole time, and nobody said a word. But the moment the truth gets filmed, suddenly there's a rule." The confrontation was no longer small. It rippled through the cabin, forming 2 invisible sides, one that wanted Andre gone so the plane could take off in peace, and another that believed injustice had just unfolded before their eyes. The security chief stepped forward. "Sir, please come with us." Andre kept his voice low, each word heavy. "Can you tell me what regulation I've violated?" "You refuse to comply with crew instructions," the man answered flatly, like a machine. "Which instruction?" "To give up the seat I paid for. There is no legitimate reason for that." The cabin fell silent. His words hit like stones on still water. No one spoke, but their eyes told the truth. Everyone knew the real reason, though no one dared to say it. A boy about 6 tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking innocently, "Mom, why are they taking him away? Did he do something wrong?" The mother quickly pulled him close, whispering, "Hush, don't ask." But that small question echoed through the cabin, sharper than any justification. Andre rose, his movements slow and deliberate. He packed away his tablet, lifted his briefcase. When he looked up, his eyes locked with Richard's. The look was not angry, not submissive, but cold and certain, the look of a man who knew he would return. "Very well," he said, his voice carrying evenly through the cabin. "I'll go. But everyone here is witnessing exactly what's happening." David sprang up, holding out a business card. "I'll be your witness. Don't forget my name." Karen cut in quickly, her voice sharp. "Please sit down immediately, sir." Andre did not take the card, but he caught the name at a glance. David Ortiz, commercial attorney. He gave a slight nod. He would find him later. The walk out of the cabin felt like a long march. Andre moved between 2 security officers down the narrow aisle. The rows of first-class seats slid past, eyes turned away, forced smiles, a few looks of pity, many of indifference. As he stepped into economy, the whispers rose. "That's the guy they pulled off. Must have caused trouble." Another muttered, "Probably drunk." Someone else, "No, maybe he skipped paying." Andre heard every word. He did not react. He knew that to many, the truth did not matter. All they needed was a reason, any reason, to believe he did not belong. At the door, he turned back, his words slow and clear. "I am a legitimate passenger. I am being forced off this plane without cause, and I have the proof." The camera in his pocket was still recording. Every gaze followed him as the cabin door shut behind him. Through the window, Andre saw Richard settling comfortably into seat 2A. A glass of champagne was placed in front of him instantly. Karen bent politely, offering a smile Andre had never once received from her. The sight cut deep like a knife, but also lit a fire in Andre's eyes. At the gate, the counteragent avoided his gaze. "Sorry, sir. The flight is preparing for departure. Please contact customer service in the lobby." "No," Andre said, his voice sharp as steel. "I was just removed from this flight without reason. I demand to speak to a manager right now." The young woman cleared her throat, irritation flickering in her eyes. "If you make this difficult, we'll have to call security again." Andre looked straight at her, a cold smile tugging at his lips. "Go ahead. But this time, the whole world will know." He pulled out his phone, dialing. "Elena, I need you now. They just forced me off the plane. Prepare another strategy and get the lawyers. This is only the beginning." In that moment, Andre Coleman knew. This humiliation was not defeat. It was the spark, and he, the man just forced out of seat 2A, would turn it into a counter-strike that would make the entire airline industry tremble. The glass door closed, leaving Andre Coleman standing alone at the gate. Around him, passengers muttered a few short comments before quickly turning away, as if by ignoring it, they could erase the injustice they had just witnessed. But Andre could not. He stood tall, his eyes fixed through the window, watching the plane carrying Richard Langford taxi down the runway, engines roaring. Seat 2A, his seat, now belonged to someone else. His phone buzzed. Elena Brooks was on the line, her voice tense. "Boss, they actually forced you off?" "Yes," Andre replied, his tone flat and cold. "Prepare an emergency plan. I need to be in San Francisco before morning." "We could just rebook a flight." "No. I will not endure another humiliation. Charter a private jet, now." Silence lingered on the other end. Then Elena's voice came back firm. "Understood. I'll call the charter team. There's a Citation X on the West Tarmac. Wheels up in 45 minutes." Andre ended the call and took a deep breath. The sting of humiliation still burned on his skin. But instead of consuming him, he let it transform into fuel. Stepping into the private terminal felt like crossing into another world. Here, there were no suspicious glances, no cold voices. The staff greeted him with respect. "Welcome, Mr. Coleman. The aircraft is ready. Would you like assistance with your luggage?" Andre only nodded. Just a nod. But inside was a storm. Why could he be treated with basic respect here, yet denied it elsewhere? He settled into the soft leather seat of the jet. The hum of the engines vibrated like the drums of war, signaling the start of a counterattack. He pulled out his phone and opened the video he had just recorded. The footage was crystal clear. Karen McAllister dismissing his email confirmation. Captain Daniel O'Neill ignoring his documents. Richard Langford sneering with words of disdain. It was undeniable. Andre didn't post it immediately. He called Monica Levine, Dataforge's legal counsel. "Monica, I have video evidence. Clear discrimination." Her voice cut sharp on the line. "Send it to me right away. I'll review it before you release anything. This isn't just a personal incident. This could be a landmark case." Andre hit send. Minutes later, Monica responded. "It's solid. No privacy violations, since it was recorded in a public setting. You can release it. I recommend attaching a statement. Calm, not emotional. Emphasize the systemic issue." Andre nodded and opened his notes app. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. He typed, "I share this story not to seek pity, but to shine a light on reality. Today, I was forced out of a seat I paid for, not because of system error, but because of bias. If this can happen to me, a CEO with every legal proof, it has happened and will continue to happen to countless others without a voice. This is not just about a seat. This is about dignity." He tagged it. "Charge justice for Andre. Seat to Pouet." His finger paused for a beat, then pressed post. The Citation X roared into the night sky. Outside the window, Atlanta's lights shrank into dots, giving way to the vast darkness above. Andre's phone buzzed non-stop. Notifications poured in. Shares, comments, retweets. The video spread like wildfire. Elena called back, her voice alight with excitement. "Boss, the video is viral. 500,000 views in 20 minutes. Journalists are already reaching out non-stop." Andre leaned back, eyes closed. The image of Richard lounging in seat 2A replayed in his mind. But this time, instead of pain, a thin smile touched his lips. He would not sit there undisturbed for long. In San Francisco, as the jet touched down, Andre's phone overflowed with messages from friends, colleagues, investors, and even strangers. A new hashtag had surged to the top of national trends. hashtag boycott Aerocoast. That evening, news broadcasts across the country led with the same headline. Black CEO forcibly removed from first-class seat. Video goes viral. Aerocoast stock plummeted 8% in after-hours trading. Investors began to panic. Andre stepped out of the private terminal, a black sedan waiting. He didn't head to his hotel as planned. Instead, he told the driver, "Straight to the convention center. I need to rewrite my entire speech." That night, in a suite overlooking the San Francisco skyline, Andre sat at his desk, the glow of his laptop casting a pale blue light. His original plan, to talk about encryption technology, now felt trivial. He started from scratch, drafting not a technical lecture, but a rallying call about dignity, justice, and leadership responsibility. Outside, the city slept, unaware that by morning an earthquake would shake the nation. Inside, Andre knew Seat 2A might have been stolen from him, but that story would become the seat of power that forced an entire industry to change. San Francisco woke up blazing bright, as if the city itself sensed a storm about to break. The National Convention Center was packed to capacity. More than 2,000 seats in the main hall had been filled early. Extra screens were set up in the corridors, and outside, long lines of people pressed in, hoping for a chance to hear. It wasn't just technologists, but also journalists, social activists, and some of Wall Street's most powerful figures. They had all been drawn here by one name: Andre Coleman. He stood backstage, dressed in a sharp suit, eyes fixed on the heavy velvet curtain. In his hands was the draft he had rewritten the night before, no longer filled with talk of quantum encryption or data systems, but with words that cut straight to the heart: dignity, justice, the right to belong. Elena Brooks stepped closer, whispering, "Are you sure about this? This isn't a tech keynote anymore." Andre gave a faint smile, his eyes burning with resolve. "Technology can wait. But today, people need to hear the truth." The host's voice rang out. "Please welcome the CEO of DataForge, Mr. Andre Coleman." The hall erupted in thunderous applause. Some shouted his name, others raised their phones to record. Andre walked into the spotlight, the glare of the stage lights wrapping him in an undeniable aura. He began slowly, his deep voice steady. "Today I was invited to speak about encryption and security. But this morning I realized something. We cannot protect data if we do not protect people." The hall fell silent. Andre recounted his story, the first-class ticket he had bought with 25 years of sweat and sacrifice, the suspicion he faced at the boarding gate the moment he was forced out of seat 2A. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply told it calmly, each word cutting like a blade. Then he fixed his gaze on the rows of journalists. "What happened to me is not an exception. It is part of a system, one where people decide who belongs and who doesn't, not based on facts, but on prejudice." Applause thundered back at him. People rose to their feet, row by row, until the entire hall was standing, a wave of solidarity rolling forward. At that moment, Leno slipped him her phone. "You need to see this." On the screen was a string of leaked emails from an anonymous source. Andre read quickly. Patricia West, Customer Relations Director at Aerocoast. VIP Richard Langford needs 2A, as always. The seat is currently held by a passenger named A. Coleman. Handle it discreetly. Karen McAllister. Understood. If he complains, we'll call it a system error. Don't worry, that kind of passenger usually doesn't make a fuss. Another attendant added, he's probably just some engineer lucky enough to get upgraded. Not a priority. Andre looked up. For a moment, the humiliation of the previous day surged back like fire. But this time, he had a weapon. He turned back to the microphone, his voice ringing like a bell. I have just received evidence, and I will share it with all of you, right here, right now. The giant screen behind him lit up. The emails enlarged, each cold sentence laid bare before thousands of eyes. Every line was a slap to Aero Coast's excuses. Gasps rippled through the hall. Some reporters bolted out, racing to break the story first. Investors paled, phones pressed tight to their ears in frantic calls. Andre closed with a voice as firm as steel. This is no longer a technical error. This was a deliberate plan. And if they could do this to me, a CEO, then they have done it to countless passengers without a voice. We cannot allow this system to exist for one more day. The applause this time was different. It wasn't simple support. It sounded like an oath. Thousands rose together, the roar shaking the floor of the convention hall. As Andre stepped off stage, sweat dotted his brow, but his eyes blazed bright. Eleanor whispered, "You just lit the fuse for a national explosion." Outside, phone screens flashed with breaking headlines. Aero Coast emails leaked. Deliberate plan to displace black CEO from seat 2A. And somewhere, inside Aero Coast headquarters, the board of directors sat in emergency session, coffee cups trembling in their hands. But as Andre walked out into the San Francisco sunlight, only one thought filled his mind. This battle was only just beginning. The next morning, America woke up to a storm of information. TV screens in coffee shops, waiting lounges, and offices all displayed the same name. Andre Coleman. CNN opened with the headline, "Black CEO forced from his rightful seat. Leaked emails expose deliberate discrimination." The New York Times ran, "Aero Coast faces historic crisis, customer contempt or systemic racism." On social media, #justice. For Andre and Homor's boycott, Aero Coast shot straight to the #1 trend. Aero Coast stock plummeted 17% in just the first hours of trading. Investors fled, customers cancelled tickets in waves, and the customer service hotline collapsed under thousands of furious calls. Some passengers released their own emails, claiming they too had been displaced from seats to make room for VIPs. Inside Aero Coast headquarters, an emergency meeting choked the air. CEO Jeffrey Williams sat at the head of the table, face ashen. Next to him, Patricia West, the author of the email ordering discreet handling, dripped sweat. "We need a statement immediately," a PR director stammered. Jeffrey slammed the table. "What kind of statement? The emails are undeniable." "We can say it was just a personal misunderstanding by staff," Patricia interjected, but the stares from the room landed on her like knives. Across the country in Washington, D.C., the office of the Congressional Transportation Committee exploded into urgent session. Chairman Harold Whitman rapped his knuckles on the table. "This isn't about one flight. This is a pattern, and now we have proof." Another congressman nodded. "We need hearings immediately. Invite Mr. Coleman as the first witness." Meanwhile, Andre sat in his San Francisco hotel suite, laptop open before him. The window was ajar, ocean breeze spilling in, but he felt no calm. His phone rang endlessly. Reporters, politicians, investors, and strangers who wanted to share their own stories. Eleanor walked in, placing a stack of morning newspapers on the table. On every front page was Andre's face, eyes burning as he read the leaked emails. "You've become a symbol," Elena said. Andre let out a tired smile. "I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted justice. Sometimes justice needs a symbol to be heard." A new email appeared. Sender: Kimberly Brooks, Director of the National Civil Rights Protection Organization. "Mr. Coleman, we are following your case closely. This is a historic opportunity to change the entire industry. We are ready to provide full legal support if you agree to take a public stand." Andre read it, emotions surging. He thought back to the years when he had chosen silence, swallowing indignities in order to move forward. But this time, it was no longer just about him. In a small bar in New York, the TV replayed the footage of Andre being escorted off the plane. A group of black janitors paused their work, eyes fixed on the screen. One murmured, "He's speaking for us. Finally, someone's standing up." At the same time in Los Angeles, an Asian-American businesswoman showed her son the video on her phone. "Do you see this? This is why you must never stay silent when injustice happens." Andre's story had broken beyond a first-class cabin. It spread into homes, offices, and became a national conversation. That evening, Andre received an unexpected call. The screen displayed a Washington, D.C. number. "Mr. Coleman, this is Congressman Harold Whitman. Next week, the Transportation Committee will hold hearings on discrimination in the airline industry. We want you as the first witness." Andre was silent for several seconds. In his mind, he heard his father's voice. "You must stand tall, not just for yourself, but for those who never had the chance." He drew a deep breath. "I accept." That night, Andre did not sleep. He sat by the window, looking out at the San Francisco lights, thinking about seat 2A, the seat stolen from him, but one that had opened another door. One first-class seat traded for a national stage. He knew the hearing would not be easy. There would be those who tried to paint him as extreme, others who would dig into his past. But he was ready. Because for the first time in his life, Andre felt it with certainty. This fight was no longer his alone. Washington, D.C. That morning was damp, the sky heavy and grey, like a curtain drawn over a grand stage. Outside the Capitol, hundreds of people crowded the entrance. Banners rose above the throng. "Justice for Andre. End discrimination in the skies." Cameras lined the steps, every major news outlet present. Andre Coleman stepped out of a black SUV, dressed in a navy suit that fit sharp, his eyes unwavering. Before him was not just a hearing, but a moment of history the entire nation was watching. Inside the hearing room glared with the brightness of studio lights. In the front rows, lawmakers whispered over stacks of thick papers. Behind them, journalists squeezed shoulder to shoulder, and the public gallery was filled to the last seat. At the center stood the witness table, with a single microphone waiting. Andre sat, placing his leather case carefully. His heart pounded hard, but his face remained calm. He knew even the slightest frown could be twisted or cut into a different story. Congressman Harold Whitman, chairman of the committee, struck his gavel. This hearing is now in session. Today we address allegations of discrimination in the airline industry. Our first witness, Mr. Andre Coleman, CEO of DataForge. The room fell silent. Andre adjusted the microphone. His voice was deep, each word ringing like metal. I sit here today, not only as a customer who was humiliated, but as a voice for thousands who have endured the same, though their names were never known. He recounted the events, the ticket for seat 2A, the suspicious stares at the boarding door, the cold decision of the captain. He played the video on the large screen, Karen McAllister dismissing his evidence, Richard Langford uttering the words, "People like you," and security escorting him away. The hearing room held its breath. A few lawmakers lowered their eyes, avoiding the cameras. Then Andre turned to the leaked emails. On the screen, the words projected large and bold. This type of customer usually doesn't make noise. Ensure VIP has 2A as always. The chamber erupted with gasps, whispers, and camera flashes. This was not a technical error. This was a system upheld by prejudice, Andre concluded, his voice firm. Congressman Whitman leaned forward. Mr. Coleman, what changes do you believe are necessary? Andre inhaled deeply, then spoke with clarity. 3 things. First, airlines must be required to publicly disclose data on discrimination, related complaints. Second, impose heavy financial penalties on airlines that violate, with those funds directed to civil rights education. Third, establish independent oversight of employee training, so that combating bias is not just a slogan, but a reality. The room stirred. Some lawmakers scribbled notes frantically. Then it was AeroCoast's turn. Jeffrey Williams, the airline's CEO, sat at the witness table. His shirt clung with sweat, his tie drawn too tight. His voice trembled. We deeply regret this unfortunate incident. This was an individual mistake, not reflective of company policy. Congresswoman Marjorie Clark cut in. An individual mistake? What about the email from your head of customer relations? That is clearly systemic. Jeffrey faltered, his words choking. Cameras turned to Patricia West, the author of the email, her face pale in the back row. Andre watched, not with satisfaction, but with certainty. He knew the truth was bigger than individuals. It was embedded in the system. The climax came when Karen McAllister, the lead flight attendant, was called. She stepped forward, her face stiff, her lawyer by her side. Her voice shook. I was only following orders. Every attendant understood that VIP passengers, especially those with influence, were to be prioritized. That understanding was tied to appearance and status. What do you mean? A congressman pressed. Karen swallowed hard, then blurted, It usually meant passengers of color were the first to be sacrificed when there was a conflict. We were trained to avoid trouble, and management believed they would react less. The chamber roared. Her confession was the final hammer blow to AeroCoast's defense. When the hearing ended, Andre walked into the hallway. Dozens of microphones thrust toward him, flashes blinding. He did not speak of himself. He spoke of the system, of the change that was needed. Today is only the first step. But justice does not stop here. It must continue until every passenger, no matter their race or status, is treated the same. Outside, the crowd chanted his name. Andre Coleman was no longer just a CEO forced from seat 2A. He had become the standard bearer in the fight for justice in the skies. 2 days after the hearing, AeroCoast's headquarters in Chicago was drowned in gloom. The glass tower that once gleamed in sunlight now wore a grey shroud like mourning cloth. Reporters camped outside, shouting questions at every employee who stepped out. Is AeroCoast guilty of systemic discrimination? Who ordered the VIP seat priority policy? Inside, the boardroom was chaos. CEO Jeffrey Williams clutched a report with trembling hands. Stock had plunged another 22% since the hearing. 3 major corporate clients, Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, and Salesforce, announced they were suspending their travel contracts with AeroCoast. Hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue evaporated in just days. "We have to sacrifice," one board member said bitterly. "If not, the whole airline will sink." The result? Jeffrey Williams, Patricia West, and 3 senior executives were forced to resign that very day. But the decision did nothing to calm the public. People did not want a handful of heads to roll. They wanted the roots torn out. In New York, Wall Street reeled from AeroCoast's unprecedented collapse. But while financiers panicked, the streets filled with protest. Signs covered Times Square. Equal skies for all. No more seat 2A injustice. International media joined in. BBC declared, "America shaken by airline racism scandal." Al Jazeera, NHK, and Le Monde all ran major headlines. From one seat, the story had crossed oceans, becoming a global symbol. And Andre, at the center of the storm, sat quietly in his San Francisco office. His desk overflowed with letters, open appeals from civil rights groups, speaking invitations from universities, offers from corporations desperate to cleanse their image. Elena Brooks walked in, setting down an open laptop. "You need to see this." On the screen, a live broadcast showed AeroCoast's interim CEO, Martin Reynolds, the former COO, delivering a public apology. "We accept responsibility for these grave mistakes. AeroCoast will undergo full restructuring and work with authorities and the community to build a culture of equality." Andre stayed silent. He listened, but he did not believe. Apologies were not enough. He wanted systemic change, not polished words to pacify shareholders. That night, Andre walked alone along San Francisco Bay. The Bay Bridge lights shimmered on the water, reminding him of the nights he stayed awake writing code in a cramped apartment. He had never dreamed of becoming a social symbol. He only wanted to build technology. But fate had placed him in a role no one else could bear. His phone buzzed. A text from Kimberly Brooks of the National Civil Rights Organization read, "You are not alone. Remember, millions are waiting for you to keep going." Andre smiled faintly, eyes blurring, not from weakness, but from the weight of that trust. Meanwhile, the public firestorm raged on. Former AeroCoast employees began speaking out. An anonymous flight attendant told the Washington Post, "We were trained unofficially. When there's a dispute, choose the path that causes the least trouble for the airline. That usually meant targeting passengers of color because they lacked the status to fight back." The article poured fuel on the flames. The boycott spread to other airlines, forcing them to publish internal data. The fear that began with AeroCoast was becoming the spark of industry-wide reform. The next day, Andre received an unexpected call. On the line was Congressman Whitman. "Mr. Coleman, the public reaction has gone beyond what anyone anticipated. Congress has decided to open an expanded hearing, not just for AeroCoast, but for the entire airline industry. And we want you to join us, this time as a policy advisor." Andre sat in silence, staring out the window at a morning sky painted gold. From one stolen seat, he was now sitting at the national chessboard. That evening, at a forum at Stanford, Andre stood before hundreds of students. He did not speak of data forge or technology. He spoke of dignity, of the years of being underestimated, of the flight that changed everything, and of turning humiliation into an opportunity for reform. A student rose and asked, "Were you afraid, facing down an entire corporation, an entire industry?" Andre smiled, his eyes alight. "Of course I was afraid. But what I fear more is allowing injustice to continue in silence." Applause thundered, not only from the students, but from thousands watching online around the world. As Andre left the hall, Elena walked beside him and whispered, "You know, they call you the man of seat 2A. But I think from now on, you're no longer sitting there alone. The whole world is sitting with you." Andre looked up at the night sky, where planes blinked as they crossed the clouds. One day, every passenger on those flights would be treated equally, and he would not stop until that day became real. 6 months after the scandal that shook the airline industry, Andre Coleman stood in the departure hall of Atlanta International, the very place where fate had once ripped away his silence. Everything felt familiar. The loudspeaker announcements, the rolling suitcases, the sunlight pouring through the glass dome. But today, the air was different. The AeroCoast check, Encounter, gleamed brand new, with a bold sign above it, "Commitment to equality, dignity for all." The staff behind the counter was a diverse team, their smiles genuine. When Andre approached, the young agent bowed slightly. "Welcome back, Mr. Coleman. It is an honor to have you on board today." There were no suspicious glances, no rushed inspections. Only simple respect, the respect he should have always received. At Gate A7, the very place that had witnessed the most humiliating moment of his life, now stood a large display with a declaration. "AeroCoast commits to equal treatment for all passengers. No one will ever be downgraded because of status or appearance. Every traveler has the right to keep the seat they purchased, without exception." Andre read it and nodded. These words were not just public relations. They had been carved by sweat, tears, and the storm he had unleashed. The announcement came. "Now boarding, first, class passengers for AeroCoast Flight 1382 to San Francisco." Andre drew a deep breath and walked into the priority lane. His heart beat with pride, but also with weight. 6 months ago, at this very moment, he had been stopped, scrutinized. Today, the flight attendant bowed. "Welcome back, Mr. Coleman. Seat 2A is ready for you." The voice carried no doubt, only respect. The first-class cabin glowed, the leather seats gleaming, new plaques mounted above each row. Respect, service, equality. Andre found 2A the same seat that had sparked a movement. On the small table lay an elegant envelope. Inside was a handwritten card. Dear Mr. Coleman, thanks to your courage, Aero Coast has changed. Thank you for forcing us to confront ourselves. With respect, the new leadership of Aero Coast. Andre sat down, his fingers brushing the smooth leather. 6 months ago, this seat had been a symbol of exclusion. Now it was a symbol of change. As he placed his laptop in the compartment, a familiar voice came from across the aisle. Mr. Coleman, do you remember me? Andre turned. It was Thomas Whitfield, the elderly janitor he had met in the first-class lounge that day. He was still in his humble uniform, but his eyes shone with pride. My grandson, he said, voice trembling with emotion. He just started his internship at Dataforge, all because of your promise. Andre smiled warmly. I only opened the door. He walked through it himself. Whitfield nodded vigorously, eyes glistening. But you gave him the faith that the door even existed. When as the plane began to taxi, the captain's voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are honored to have a special passenger, Mr. Andre Coleman, the man whose courage inspired change across the entire airline industry. Applause erupted through the cabin. Andre bowed his head slightly in thanks. He did not crave personal glory, but he knew that every clap was a signal of a new chapter, one where fairness was a standard, not an exception. In the quiet moment, Andre opened his email. A new message appeared from Amanda McAllister, the chief flight attendant who had once removed him from seat 2A. Mr. Coleman, I do not ask for forgiveness. For the past 6 months, I have been attending bias training, working with civil rights groups. I now teach new flight attendants about my mistake. I know I hurt you, but I hope to turn that wrongdoing into a lesson for others. Thank you for maintaining your dignity that day. It was your composure that changed me. Andre closed his eyes briefly. He would not forget, but he felt a spark of hope. Even those who had once caused pain could learn to do better. Outside the window, the San Francisco skyline appeared on the horizon. Andre thought back to his boyhood in Baltimore, a child in worn-out shoes, studying by night while working by day, believing that education was the only way out of his neighborhood. That boy now sat in seat 2A, not because of a first-class ticket, but because he had turned humiliation into the lever that moved an entire industry. The wheels touched down with a screech. A young passenger nearby leaned over and whispered, You are the reason I applied for an internship at Dataforge. Thank you for making me believe that we belong too. Andre smiled. Seat 2A had finally become a seat for everyone. 1 year after that fateful day, Washington, D.C. once again blazed with cameras, but this time, Andre Coleman did not walk into a hearing room with a tense face. He walked in as a leader, the founder of the Air Travel Equality Initiative, an independent watchdog for the entire airline industry. The grand hall of the Department of Transportation was packed. Airline executives, lawmakers, journalists, and community leaders filled the room. Behind the podium, a banner read, One Sky, Equal for All. Andre stood before the microphone, his voice ringing like a bell. Seat 2A has become a symbol. But it is not just my seat. It represents the right to belong for everyone. From today forward, Every airline operating in the United States is required to publish data on discrimination. We will no longer be silent. No more exceptions." The applause thundered, not the polite kind, but the heartbeat of an entire generation. After the conference, Andre returned to the new offices of the initiative on Massachusetts Avenue. The walls were lined with screens displaying reports from airlines, complaint rates, seat assignments, demographic data. The numbers were no longer buried, but illuminated for all to see. Elena Brooks, now the executive director of the initiative, walked in. "You should see this." On the screen played a BBC report. "Europe, Asia, and Africa begin adopting the US model of airline oversight." Andre smiled faintly. From one flight, now the world was beginning to change. That evening, Andre attended a United Nations Awards ceremony. In the glittering hall of chandeliers, the Secretary General placed the Global Justice Award into his hands. "Mr. Coleman," he said, "you have shown that a single act of dignity and conviction can change an entire global system." Andre bowed his head, but in his heart he heard his father's voice once more. "Stand your ground, son. Not with anger, but with the belief that you belong." Back at his hotel, Andre opened his laptop and read emails from around the world. A student in Kenya wrote, "Because of your story, I had the courage to sue my local bus company for discrimination." A young engineer in India shared, "I applied for a leadership position I once thought I could never deserve." Andre closed the laptop, his eyes misting over. Seat 2A had flown farther than he had ever imagined. A week later, Andre was back on a flight to San Francisco. This time, the first-class cabin was full of passengers of every color, every profession, all treated equally. When the plane leveled at cruising altitude, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a very special passenger. Because of him, everyone can now sit in the seat they paid for, without exception. Please join me in thanking Mr. Andre Coleman." The cabin erupted in applause. A little white girl sitting with her parents turned to Andre, her eyes shining. "You're the man from seat 2A, aren't you? My teacher told us about you." Andre smiled and leaned down to whisper, "Yes. But remember this. Seat 2A now belongs to everyone. And one day, you too can change the world." The plane soared above the clouds, the setting sun painting the horizon red. Andre gazed out the window, his heart filled with peace. He knew the journey was not over. There were still systems to confront, injustices to challenge. But from that one small seat, he had proven that a single person who stood firm could change the entire sky. High above, the engines hummed like a victory song, and in the glow of twilight, Andre closed his eyes and heard his father's voice once more in memory. "Stand your ground, son, not with anger, but with unshakable conviction that you belong." Seat 2A had become a legacy that carried not only the name of Andre Coleman, but belonged to everyone who believed that justice can take flight and soar far. In the world of business, a first-class seat may seem small, yet it can become the catalyst for a global movement. Andre Coleman proved that true power does not come from wealth or status, but from the courage to stand up when injustice occurs. His story did not just change one airline, it forced an entire industry to confront itself. More than that, it gave millions of people the belief that no matter who you are, you deserve to be respected. If you believe that dignity is not a privilege but a right for all of us, hit like to spread this message. Do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next stories of justice and change. And I want to hear from you. Leave a comment with just 2 words, equal justice, to affirm that the world we must build begins with respect.